By the way, could you tell me more about what the windsurf in Xano is? Is it a specific feature?
Sure.
What is it an automation?
So Windsurf is, I'm going to just quickly share my screen, is an editor that allows you to use AI within your regular developer environment. So this is the website for Windsurf, and I just want to see if they would show visually what it looks like. But this is actually, yeah, this is actually a good example. So basically, it's the same way that we might communicate with Claude or ChatGPT. We're asking questions and we're making requests. Windsurf allows us to do that within context of being able to actually access the files and access everything about the code within the IDE. And it also allows it to run terminal commands. You can push to your GitHub repo. You can give it links to another GitHub repo and tell it, hey, go check out the history of this repo and tell me what you learn from it. You could have it do all kinds of multi-file editing and changes that are extensive across the application. And because you're working with it within an IDE, you're
Uh-huh.
able to leverage the traditional tools that people have figured out over time work well for for a development environment, right? Like GitHub and all these things, they exist for a reason and they're well established for a reason is because they encourage collaboration and they help in case if anything changes or goes wrong, we're able to easily go back and to keep track of what might have changed or gone wrong. This is actually Windsurf here running on just here on my computer. And
Mhm.
if I look over here, I can see that there is let me just put this down. So if I look over on the right side, I can see that there are some options. I have all these different AIs that I'm able to choose actually. I can even choose Cloud 3.5 or 4.0, 3.7, right? Some of the newest AIs out there. And you have access to being able to choose any one of these AIs. So this lets you really, and you get quite a different experience with choosing each one. So
Really?
yeah, like they really are at different levels of coding ability, of comprehension. And for me, I personally prefer Claude 3.7 or 3.5. I found that they bring the best results. And you see it's reflected by how much each one costs in terms of credits, because some of them cost more in credits. I have a plan that's unlimited anyways, but you can see it's reflected that like Gemini 2.0 is the cheapest at 0.25 credits, or DeepSeek is zero point 0.5 credits, but thinking version of 3.7 is 1.25 credits. So there's a few options that you can choose. I'm going to choose 3.7. One thing that's actually cool is you can see you can even configure what's called MCP. I believe it stands for Model Context Protocol. This is actually a new.
Mhm.
I don't have this set up yet, but this basically lets you communicate with other machines. It's actually, this was developed by Anthropic, the MCP, but we will get into that right now. What I want to is, okay, so if we look at this boilerplate, so I have this folder, it's called boilerplate. So what I did was I open up folder and I can choose the same way that when we're working within a regular IDE, we're just choosing the app that we're working on. We're choosing the folder that contains our files. And so the folder that I chose is one that's called boilerplate because I was already working on this. And what I'm working on here is essentially an experiment for myself. I'm not sure if this will end up being in anyone's hands, but what I'm trying to work on is something that resembles an environment that expects that the user is going to be eventually working with Xano. That's their goal, that they're working with Xano. So you can even see that on the left side here, I have some naming that is specifically talking about Xano. So what I tried to do was make it so that it has a separation of concerns, similar to how WeWeb has a separation of concern. You go into WeWeb and it's separated. It's told you that here's the front end, here's your auth, here you put in your key, and then your Xano, your backend's over there. And then with your front end, we also are focused on your logic, right? Like they've taken your front end design and combined it, but also made it very clear as much as possible. Where does the logic, how does that get triggered when you're taking certain actions? And they've also made it so that it's clear to like, where is your data coming from and how are you interacting with it? So I'm trying to take that and bring some of those qualities to this project where, okay, let's say, for example, if we want to talk about your configuration for Xano, right? Having that be in a specific area of the application so that you're only affect that in just one part of the application. So if we look at config, we can see that, okay, your API key, like putting it in here, putting in your, what's your instance? Like it's just a few, literally just changing a few things, the same way that you would change it on WeWeb. But here we're putting it in code and it's just pointing out specifically, okay, you just put your API key here, you put in your domain instance, and then that's it, right? It's going to take that and apply it to wherever else it needs to be in the application. So we're looking at all this and we're like, I understand how this might look a little bit crazy because normally, again, like I appreciate how like with WeWeb, it's you're able to see the stuff on the page and then that's a different experience. So what I want to kind of show now is how the AI becomes part of this, right? So that this becomes a different experience because right now we're just looking at this and this is how it's always been with traditional code. So let me see. I'm going to type over here on the right side. I would like to preview this boilerplate web app. Can you run it in a preview? Oh, yes.
Sorry, you said previously about the models of AI you can use to run the process. You said that you see huge differences between totally different models, OpenAI instead of Claude. But do you see big differences between models from the same brand, like Claude 3.5 instead of Claude 3.7?
Yes. So I would say that there actually is quite a difference. Claude 3.7, it can take, it takes time to think. So that's what it does. And all it's doing is, as far as my understanding of it, is that they're just giving it more processing time. It's not actually thinking. It's just taking, you're just giving it more time to maybe process multiple times what you would usually do with one click, or with 10 clicks, you're doing it with one click now. It's taking more time. Because it takes more time, it has a different approach. It comes to a different conclusion, right? Like when it's thinking for longer, it might make assumptions that it wouldn't have time to make if you were working with 3.5, because 3.7 is giving itself more time to get into the questions. And you can see how it's thinking because they make that transparent. They actually show you its inner monologue as it's going through it. It's explaining, it's talking to itself. You can see it talking to itself. And what I found is that sometimes it actually with 3.7 thinking, that it gets stuck a lot because it thinks too much about it. I find that with 3.7 for thinking, it's not a bad idea to actually use that for the plan, to establish what the plan will be. And then you take that and give it to 3.7 regular or 3.5 regular, because that's gonna have the best of both worlds, because you want to give it its instructions and have it execute. That's what I found works better. So that's, so there is definitely a bit of different experiences when it comes to using different AIs. Same thing with if you're using DeepSeek, or that is going to take, the last time I used it, it does a lot of thinking as well. And sometimes that doesn't always translate to the best experience here. But then this context here, actually, I want to see if I can open this. Oh, there we go. So we can see this now, right?
Yeah.
So this is actually the application. So I'm actually able to come in and to click on it and to use it, right? And it's actually, I don't know if I'll be able to
Wow.
log in. That would be. So if I come and I log in, so I'm actually able to come in and to log in and to use it. This is just an example of the boilerplate, right? I think that this is an interesting learning experience for a lot of people, because part of what this accomplishes is it also makes it less intimidating, maybe in certain ways, where a person can look at this now and they can feel like, okay, at least I can see the app. And and then once the person can see, then they can start to perhaps understand, or if they're interested to, they can definitely understand what is going on here, basically. And what I want to show is that essentially, like here we can see all the pages, how they're built out. We can see every page, the code for it. And we don't have to deal with this code, right? We can ask AI to make changes. We can see where the code is. We can see that it's all here built in. This is actually all built in React. And if I come over into here, look on this page, right? Like one
Right.
of the things that the, I think the main question is for a lot of people is, how do you affect the change that you want, right? Because it's not super clear. But if we click here and I click on send element, you can see I can actually move around and it's going to highlight different parts of the page, right? And very similar now to WeWeb, where WeWeb, you're able to select different parts of the page. And if I select, for example, I select this whole header up here. Or actually, yeah, let's just select its header. I can see now in the very bottom, they added it to the chat. So now it's selected this element. So instead of me going into the code and having to find the element or having to even explain to it, hey, I want you to change the header, then it thinks, what header? You don't have to worry about that because you're selecting the header the same way we do in WeWeb, right? The same way we do with many of these visual builders. And so I can tell it, okay, here's the nav. I would like this header to have a different styling.
Oh,
And let's see. So
yeah.
now when it navigates, it finds it because it knows exactly what you want. And you can see it's going through the application. It's making sure that it has some nice built-in functionality that the Windsurf team has made so that it's not able to make uncontrolled changes. Like even right now, like you can see it blocks itself when it's making changes that are maybe too far. Or if it didn't check to see first, you can see it just changed right now live on the page.
Yeah.
So you can see here, I can even open an external browser. If I click on this, it also work. Let me see if I can, here you go. So you can see I can also open it in an external browser or I can view it here. And it's deploying, it does a whole bunch of stuff very quickly. But what it did was it goes and it pushes this, it opens up a port and basically it previews this in your browser and just makes it so that you're immediately able to see what you're working with. That I'll just point out from here is that why do we do this? So I think that this opens the door to a person who's, if they're willing to invest their time and energy into it, if it's interesting to them to learn, what they're able to do is instead of using, let's say, a tool like WeWeb, they can still use Xano, right? Like for me, within my context, what Xano is very valuable for is the same way, like for Airtable for you, that's what contains the business logic for your client, right? That's a it's their thinking, it's their methods. For me, it's on Xano. And with the front end, in this case right now, it's with WeWeb. But what if it wasn't with WeWeb? What if it was with one of these tools that lets us really generate that whole tedious part very quickly, like very quickly, and you can host it anywhere that you want, right? Like without any limitation. And you can have it be, and yes, it's not like you can, it still takes a bit of work to work with it, but WeWeb also takes work to work with, right? WeWeb has quite the learning curve to it as well.
Yeah.
But my main point is that what we can do is essentially take this and I have this up on GitHub, right? This whole boilerplate that we just saw is on the GitHub repo with full documentation. You can see a full explanation of how it works. The point is that because it's in traditional code, and it's not locked down, it's totally flexible. You can just come in and run it from your console and immediately take this from the GitHub repo and have the whole project in 3 seconds. Everything that I just showed here, it's about starting from here. That's my whole point, right? Like it's not about necessarily somebody else because it took me quite a bit of time in order to build this, what we see in front of us. But we don't have to do this every time. Like we setting this up, knowing, okay, right now, even I just already log in, I'm already able to use Xano with it automatically. And so this is where I think with a bit of interest and evolution, that this can actually be something that provides some interesting benefits over using potentially WeWeb, right? Depending on the context.
Mhm.
One of the benefits that speak very closely to why people use WeWeb, right? Like when it comes, and this is where I see the bridge being covered. It's just when I'm able to come in here and I can click and I can choose these elements, this is starting to become something that's perhaps interesting for someone to learn. And that's what we're looking for, interest for people to want to learn this because that's a key part of ownability.
That's really great. And since we have to drop now, let's schedule. Send me an invitation, Rob, for 1 hour session the day that works for you during the week to continue from that place because it was a really interesting thing. I think
Yeah.
we have to continue on that.
Sorry, because I have to hop off right now. I
Yeah,
have
sure, sure.
late. So sorry.
Run it, run
Cheers.
it. Bye.
I'm gonna bye bye.